Have you ever wondered why Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, had multiple wives? This question often comes up when we discuss matters about his life, but the answer isn't as simple and straightforward as it might seem. Was it a matter of personal desire, or was there something more, maybe something deeper or spiritual behind it? Today, we're going to explore the true reasons behind the Prophet Muhammad's marriages. If you've been searching for answers to that, then you need to watch this video to the end. The answers lie not just in his personal life, but in the society he lived in, the mission he carried, his assignment, and the spiritual lessons he imparted through his actions. Without a doubt, the Prophet's actions and roles in marriage have helped shape the early Muslim community and beyond. But before we get started, take a moment to hit that like button, subscribe, and tap the notification bell so you don't miss any of our future videos on fascinating historical topics like this one. We'll uncover stories and insights you won't hear anywhere else. So stick around. We promise you that this is going to be an interesting journey. Let's dive right in. To truly understand why Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, had multiple wives, we first need to know what the world of 7th century Arabia was like. This period was a time long before the rise of modern society, when life was shaped by tribes, honor, and survival. In this environment, marriage wasn't just a personal choice. It was deeply tied to society, family bonds, and tribal alliances. In pre-Islamic Arabia, the practice of polygamy was already common. It wasn't unusual for men to marry several women. Those who married multiple wives often did so to strengthen political ties and create alliances with other kingdoms or tribes. These marriages were less about love, but more about securing status, expanding influence, and ensuring the survival of the tribe. At that time, women's rights were severely limited. In many cultures, women had no say in whom they married, and often their primary role was to bear children and maintain the household. The role of women in the wider society was very different from what we understand today. However, this was not a world of pure chaos. Tribal life had its own code of honor and customs. Tribes often had strict rules about marriage, inheritance, and social status. But one thing was clear. Marriage wasn't just about individual relationships. It was a social contract, and in many cases, it was a way to ensure social order and stability within the tribe. Polygamy, in particular, was seen as a way to solve several societal issues. For example, men with multiple wives could take care of widows and orphans, which were significant concerns in a time when warfare was common, and men often died young. Marrying widows, therefore, wasn't just a personal choice, but a social responsibility. But even though polygamy was widely practiced, not all marriages were equal. Wealthy men often had many wives, while the average person had only one or two. The status of a man, and by extension, his marriages, were closely linked to his tribal status, wealth, and influence. It was a system where marriage wasn't just about romance, but also economics and power dynamics. Now, you might be asking yourself, how does this relate to Prophet Muhammad's own marriages? Wasn't he just following the same path as other men in his society? Well, that's where things start to get really interesting. Prophet Muhammad's approach to marriage was not just a reflection of the social norms of his time. It was different. It was part of a broader, revolutionary shift in how the world viewed relationships, social justice, and the treatment of women. The Prophet's first marriage to Khadijah bint Khuwailid, a successful businesswoman who was 15 years older than him, was not only based on mutual respect and love, but also marked a significant departure from the typical norms of his time. Khadijah, a widow, chose Muhammad to be her husband, a highly unusual move in a society where marriages were often arranged. This wasn't just a marriage, it was a partnership, one that would deeply influence Muhammad's future decisions and actions. So, while polygamy was already a practice in 7th century Arabia, Prophet Muhammad's marriage philosophy was shaped by a combination of compassion, justice, and revolutionary ideas that were ahead of his time. His marriages weren't just about personal desires, they had deeper, social, political, and spiritual purposes. But what exactly were those purposes? Why did Prophet Muhammad marry multiple wives after the death of Khadijah? Was it for personal reasons, or was there a divine and societal mission behind it all?
The answers lie ahead, where we'll look at the Prophet's marriage to Sauda, Aisha, and others. To understand the profound significance of Prophet Muhammad's later marriages, we first need to look at his first marriage, a relationship that would profoundly shape his life and the early days of Islam. His first wife, Khadijah bint Khuwailid, wasn't just any woman. She was a widow, a successful businesswoman, and a prominent figure in Mecca. She was 15 years older than Muhammad, yet their partnership was one built on mutual respect, trust, and love. What's striking about their marriage is that Khadijah proposed to Muhammad. In a society where women had limited agency, her decision to choose Muhammad as her husband was unusual. She recognized in him qualities of honesty and integrity, and these would later earn him the title of Al-Amin, the trustworthy. For 25 years, their marriage was a model of stability and love. Khadijah was not only a supportive wife, but also a key figure in Muhammad's life, especially as he began receiving his first revelations from God. She was the first believer in Islam, providing him with emotional and financial support during the early years of his prophetic mission. Her support was crucial in those early days when the Prophet faced persecution and hardship. Without Khadijah's encouragement, it's hard to imagine how Muhammad would have managed to endure the hostility of the Quraysh tribe. Her death in 619 CE marked a turning point in his life, and with it, a significant shift in the way Prophet Muhammad's role as a leader would unfold. When Khadijah passed away, Prophet Muhammad entered a new phase of his life. But even in the midst of his grief, he didn't rush into remarriage for personal reasons. His decision to marry again was not driven by the need for companionship, but by deeper social, humanitarian, and spiritual needs. One of the first women he married after Khadijah was Sauda bint Zam'a, a widow who had lost her husband in the early years of Islam. She was older, and her marriage to the Prophet Muhammad helped ensure that she would be cared for and supported in a society where widows were often left vulnerable. Sauda's marriage wasn't about love in the romantic sense, but about providing her with dignity and protection. She was one of the first converts to Islam, and her marriage to the Prophet helped solidify the Prophet's role as the protector of his followers. But the most well-known of his marriages after Khadijah was to Aisha bint Abi Bakr, the daughter of his close friend and companion, Abi Bakr. Aisha's marriage to Prophet Muhammad is often discussed, partly because of her young age at the time of their marriage, which was a norm for the era. But beyond the age difference, Aisha played a central role in the early Muslim community. She became a prominent figure in Islamic scholarship and played a crucial role in the transmission of hadith, the sayings of the Prophet. Aisha's marriage to the Prophet wasn't just a union for political or social reasons, it was also significant for the way she would help carry forth the message of Islam after his death. Aisha's wisdom and insight would later be shared with the Muslim community, shaping the future of Islamic thought for generations to come. But why did Prophet Muhammad choose Aisha specifically? Was there a larger purpose behind their union? And what role did his other marriages play in shaping the community and spreading Islam's message? To understand the full significance of these unions, we must take a closer look at the social and political functions of his marriages. After the passing of Khadijah, Prophet Muhammad's life entered a new phase, marked by his marriages to several women, each with her own story and significance. But it's important to understand that these marriages were not just for personal reasons. They were deeply tied to the social, political, and humanitarian roles that the Prophet had as a leader of a growing community. The Prophet's marriages in this period served multiple functions, from creating alliances to protecting vulnerable women. One of the first women he married after Khadijah was Sauda bint Zam'a, a widow who had lost her husband in the early years of Islam. She was older, and her marriage to Prophet Muhammad helped ensure that she would be cared for and supported in a society where widows were often left vulnerable. Sauda's marriage wasn't about love in the romantic sense, but about providing her with dignity and protection. She was one of the first converts to Islam, and her marriage to the Prophet helped solidify the Prophet's role as the protector of his followers. Next came Aisha bint Abi Bakr, the daughter of the Prophet's close friend and future successor, Abi Bakr. Aisha's marriage to Muhammad is one of the most talked about in Islamic history, and often a subject of curiosity. While her young age at the time of marriage is frequently discussed, it's crucial to understand the context of the time. Marriages in 7th century Arabia, particularly in the tribal system, often took place at a much younger age than we'd expect today. Aisha's marriage was not just a union for companionship, but a partnership that played a critical role in the Prophet's mission. Aisha would go on to become one of the most knowledgeable and influential figures in early Islam. After the death of the Prophet, Aisha became one of the most prolific narrators of hadith, the sayings of the Prophet. Her deep understanding of the Prophet's life and message was invaluable to the early Muslim community. But there was more to these marriages than just personal relationships. Prophet Muhammad's subsequent marriages were also strategically important in terms of building alliances. For example, his marriage to Hafsa bint Omar, the daughter of his close companion Omar ibn al-Khattab, was a union that helped strengthen ties with one of the most prominent families in early Islam. Hafsa was a widow, and by marrying her, the Prophet helped ensure her security while also strengthening the bond between him and Omar, who would later become the second caliph of Islam. Similarly, Prophet Muhammad's marriages to Zainab bint Khuzaimah and Salama were also deeply tied to the protection of women and the strengthening of social ties. Zainab, who was known as the mother of the poor, was another widow whom the Prophet married to care for her after her husband's death. Salama, a wise and respected woman, was also a widow, and her marriage to the Prophet reflected his commitment to providing care and dignity to women who had lost their husbands. These marriages were also strategic in terms of protecting the early Muslim community. During this period, the Muslim community faced external threats, and the Prophet's marriages helped solidify political alliances with powerful tribes. For example, through his marriage to Safiya bint Hayy, a Jewish woman from the tribe of Banu Nadir, Prophet Muhammad helped create an important alliance with a previously hostile tribe. This marriage was not only a personal union, but also a symbol of reconciliation and unity among different communities. By marrying women from different backgrounds, Prophet Muhammad also showed the world that Islam was a religion for all people, not just one group. His marriages, though often misunderstood today, were part of a larger effort to build a just and unified society where women were not just seen as property, but as partners with rights, dignity, and respect. But here's where things get interesting. The common perception is that these marriages were for personal reasons, yet the deeper reality is that they were all tied to the spiritual, social, and political development of the early Muslim community. Prophet Muhammad's actions as a husband were deeply intertwined with his role as a leader and reformer. His marriages demonstrated how Islam valued compassion, justice, and respect for women in ways that were revolutionary for the time. So, now that we've seen how the Prophet's marriages were shaped by social and political necessity, let's look deeper at the spiritual and humanitarian purposes behind these unions. How did these marriages help spread Islam and transform the role of women in the early Muslim world?
These marriages weren't just about the practicalities of social structure or building alliances. They carried profound lessons for the early Muslim community and for humanity as a whole. At the heart of these marriages was the role of women in Islam. While many societies of the time viewed women as property or secondary citizens, Islam revolutionized the way women were treated. Prophet Muhammad's marriages were an essential part of this reform. Through his actions,
He showed the world that women had rights. They were to be treated with dignity, and they played an integral role in the development of the Muslim community. Let's look at how Prophet Muhammad's marriage to Khadijah, for example, set the foundation for this new perspective. Khadijah was not just a wife. She was a partner, a businesswoman, and an active supporter of the Prophet's mission. She was the first person to accept Islam, and through her support, the Prophet's early years of prophethood were possible. Their marriage was founded on mutual respect, trust, and shared responsibility, offering a model of partnership that transcended the norms of the time. After her death, the Prophet's subsequent marriages continued this pattern of empowerment. Women were not merely brides in these unions, they were mothers of the believers, active participants in the development of Islam, and often key figures in the preservation of Islamic knowledge. One of the key ways in which the Prophet's marriages impacted the early Muslim community was through the preservation of knowledge. Women like Aisha, Salama, and Hafsa became some of the most important transmitters of hadith, the sayings and actions of the Prophet. In fact, Aisha became one of the most knowledgeable individuals in the early Muslim community, compiling and sharing numerous hadith that are integral to Islamic teachings today. By marrying these women, Prophet Muhammad gave them the platform to contribute to the faith in meaningful ways. They weren't just relegated to the background, they were key players in the intellectual and spiritual growth of the early Muslim world. This was a radical shift from the way women were typically treated in other societies of the time. But beyond education and leadership, the marriages of Prophet Muhammad also had significant humanitarian implications. Many of the women he married were widows or divorced, and by marrying them, he provided them with dignity, protection, and a role in the community. In a society where women without husbands or male guardians often faced significant challenges, these marriages offered security and respect. For example, Salama, another of the Prophet's wives, was known for her wisdom and intelligence. After her husband passed away, she was left a widow with children. Prophet Muhammad's marriage to her ensured that she was not left vulnerable, but was instead able to continue contributing to the community through her knowledge and leadership. These marriages weren't about fulfilling the desires of the Prophet. They were about serving the greater good of the Muslim community. They served as a practical model for how society could treat women with honor and respect. Each marriage had its own unique significance, but they all shared a common purpose: to strengthen the Muslim community and to empower women in ways that were unprecedented for the time. But there's more to this story. Beyond the practical and humanitarian aspects, there was also a spiritual lesson embedded in the Prophet's marriages. His relationships with his wives reflected the prophetic model of marriage, one of compassion, understanding, and mutual respect. So, we've explored the spiritual and humanitarian significance behind these marriages, but what role did these unions play in the spread of Islam? How did Prophet Muhammad's marriages influence the growth and legacy of the Muslim community? Let's uncover how his marriages were not just personal decisions, but key factors in the success and expansion of Islam. These unions were not just historical events. They laid the foundation for principles that would shape the future of Islam and human society for centuries to come. One of the most important aspects of Prophet Muhammad's marriages was the way they set a precedent for marriage in Islam. His relationships with his wives were based on justice, compassion, and mutual respect, principles that became the cornerstone of Islamic teachings about marriage and family life. In a world where women were often treated as property, objects, or second-class citizens, Prophet Muhammad's example provided a radical shift in how women were to be treated within the framework of marriage. Islamic teachings, based on the Prophet's actions, emphasize that marriage should be a partnership, not a hierarchical relationship where one partner holds power over the other. The Quran itself instructs men to treat their wives with kindness and respect, and Prophet Muhammad exemplified this throughout his marriages. For example, in one well-known hadith, the Prophet said, "The best of you are those who are the best to their wives." This statement is a powerful reminder that marriage is not about control or dominance, but about mutual respect, compassion, and cooperation. His treatment of his wives set a model for Muslim men throughout history, teaching them that a good marriage is one rooted in care, love, and understanding. Another key legacy of the Prophet's marriages was their role in the preservation and transmission of knowledge. Many of Prophet Muhammad's wives, such as Aisha, became key figures in Islamic scholarship. After the Prophet's death, Aisha became one of the most prominent figures in early Islam, teaching both men and women about the sayings and actions of the Prophet. She is reported to have narrated over 2,000 hadith, sayings of the Prophet, which are foundational to Islamic teachings today. In addition to Aisha, other wives like Salama and Hafsa were also instrumental in transmitting the knowledge of the Prophet's teachings to the Muslim community. The fact that these women were involved in spreading Islamic knowledge demonstrates the high regard in which the Prophet held women, encouraging them to be active participants in the spiritual and intellectual development of the early Muslim world. But the legacy of Prophet Muhammad's marriages extends beyond the intellectual realm. His marriages had a profound social impact on the Muslim community as well. By marrying women who were widows, divorcees, or from marginalized backgrounds, the Prophet set a powerful example of compassion and inclusivity. His actions demonstrated that women, regardless of their social status, were valuable members of the community who deserved respect, dignity, and support. In many ways, Prophet Muhammad's marriages served as a social safety net for women who were often left vulnerable. His unions with these women were a reflection of the broader Islamic principles of justice, fairness, and social equity. In a world where women were often powerless and without rights, Prophet Muhammad's marriages offered them the protection, respect, and empowerment they had previously been denied. So, what can we learn from the Prophet's marriages today? These relationships are not just ancient stories. They hold timeless lessons for how we treat one another in modern relationships. The principles of mutual respect, kindness, and fairness that the Prophet demonstrated continue to resonate with Muslims and non-Muslims alike. His marriages were not about personal gain or desire. They were about creating a just society where both men and women are treated with dignity and where love is built on compassion and responsibility. In today's world, where gender equality and social justice are more important than ever, the legacy of Prophet Muhammad's marriages offers a powerful model for how to build healthy, loving relationships based on mutual respect, empathy, and shared responsibility. We've explored how Prophet Muhammad's marriages shaped Islamic teachings and had a profound impact on the Muslim community. But what about the modern-day misinterpretations of his marriages? How have these unions been misunderstood by some, and what can we do to correct those misconceptions?
As we've seen throughout this video, Prophet Muhammad's marriages were deeply rooted in social justice, humanitarian principles, and spiritual wisdom. Yet, despite the clear historical and contextual reasons behind his marriages, there are still many misconceptions and misunderstandings surrounding them, particularly in the modern world. One of the most common misconceptions is that Prophet Muhammad's multiple marriages were solely driven by personal desires or that they were in some way oppressive to women. Some critics point to the fact that he had multiple wives as a way to criticize polygamy in general, often overlooking the context and purpose of these unions. The reality is that the Prophet's marriages were far more complex and purposeful than many realize. One of the most important things to recognize is that in the context of 7th century Arabia, polygamy was a widely accepted practice. However, it was Prophet Muhammad who introduced restrictions and protections within the practice. Islam allowed a man to marry up to 4 wives, but only if he could treat them equally and fairly. The Prophet's example was one of compassionate polygamy, one that took into account the well-being of women and ensured they were treated with dignity and respect. When we look at the Prophet's marriages through a modern lens, we must remember that they were not about personal gratification or exploitation, as some might suggest.
Rather, they were rooted in social reform, humanitarian care, and the advancement of women's rights at a time when they were marginalized in many societies. Another common misconception is that Prophet Muhammad's marriages were an exceptional case, that his example cannot be applied to today's world. But in reality, the principles underlying these marriages, justice, compassion, respect, and equality, are just as relevant today as they were in the 7th century. Prophet Muhammad's treatment of his wives was a model for how men and women can work together as partners, each showing love and respect for the other. As we conclude this video, it's important to recognize that Prophet Muhammad's marriages were not just about his personal life. They were about setting a precedent for how to build just, loving, and respectful relationships, whether in the 7th century or today. His legacy continues to offer valuable lessons in respect, compassion, and responsibility in marriage. We've come to the end of our journey through Prophet Muhammad's marriages, and I hope you've gained a deeper understanding of why he had so many wives and the profound legacy those marriages have left behind. These unions were not about personal gain, but about social reform, humanitarian care, and spiritual leadership. If you enjoyed this video and learned something new, please hit that like button, subscribe, and share it with anyone who might benefit from this deeper understanding of Islamic history. If you'd like to support the channel and help us continue to produce more insightful videos like this, check out our Buy Me a Coffee link in the description below. Every bit of support helps us create more quality content for you. Also, don't forget to explore more fascinating videos on our channel about the history of Islam, key figures, and events that shaped the world. Thanks for watching, and as always, I am going to see you in the next one.